Welcome back to Master Your Glass with me, Livio Laro. Today we are going to make 14 different variations to the Negroni cocktail, but these aren't just any variation. These are time-tested, classic predecessors and successors of the world's greatest cocktail. Let's get into this. So needless to say, the cocktail Negroni is an absolute legend with more and more popularity coming from a drink that's 100+ years old, and also a drink that is so popular that it now has a whole week dedicated to it called Negroni Week. And in the description below, I will leave you a link on our next Negroni Week. But the Negroni really started a step before that with a few other drinks, and I want to talk about those first, and then we'll dive into the Negroni and its variations. The first one here is called the Tomi, Torino-Milano. And the Torino-Milano, we know very little about it other than we knew that it was made with Amaro Cora from Torino and Campari from Milano. I don't have any Cora with me today, so I have made this with a different type of Amaro, but this drink here is important, of course, to lead us into the next one, which is the Mito. Now, it is said that as a riff to the Tomi, which was the Torino-Milano, came the Mito, which is the Milano-Torino. We don't know much about this drink either, but what we do know is that in 1932, it was celebrated or used to celebrate the opening of a highway in Italy called the A4. And now, by that time, the Americano was already invented. By that time, the Negroni was already invented. And so by that time, of course, the Mito was also invented, but here's how you make it. So Milano-Torino had the two ingredients, Campari from Milano and sweet vermouth from Torino. So we're gonna do equal parts. In this case here, I'm going to do 1.5 ounces or 45 mils of Campari. And 1.5 ounces or 45 mils of your sweet vermouth. I am using Cinzano 1757, which is a vermouth di Torino. It is based on an ancient recipe, Torino, of course, being the birthplace of sweet vermouth in Italy. I'm gonna set that aside, and this one here, we're gonna garnish with a lemon peel. And now we have a Milano-Torino. So this now brings us to the next drink, which is the Americano. I'm gonna fill a glass with ice. Now the Americano also has a very nebulous story behind it. Some people say that this drink was created in honor of an American boxer, Primo Carnera, who of course was active in America, thus the Americano. Other stories, probably more credible, was that it was created at Gaspare Campari's cafe in Milan. And of course, another story was that the Milano-Torino, the Mito, which is the drink, of course, I just made, was a little too harsh on the palate of the American tourists. So they asked for a little bit of soda inside of their Milano-Torino, which ended up being called the Americano. Whatever that story is, let's just go ahead and make it. So in this glass right here, I'm going to put 1.5 ounces or 45 mils of Campari, just like that. And what you have to love about Italian cocktails is the fact that most of them are made with a bar spoon. Sometimes I have to cringe when I see how some of these cocktails are made. These are all light ingredients, easy to mix. They were made this way, because, well, that's how you can and should make them, but also because we have to remember these were made inside of coffee shops and ice cream parlors and tea stands, and the barista made croissants and cappuccinos and espressos, so they don't have time to really complicate this drink. Now, on top of the 45 mils, 1.5 ounce of Campari and the equal amount of sweet vermouth, I'm gonna put about a couple of ounces of soda water. And this here is an adjustment that is up for debate. I'm gonna just top it just like that. A little mix here will get us going. And in this case here, we're going to shoot for an orange and a lemon. We're just gonna add the lemon and the orange. And there you have the Americano. This now brings us to 1919 or 1920, sometime around those 2 years, to Florence, where Count Camillo Negroni asks for his bartender Fosco to actually toughen up his Negroni. So let's make it. So in here, once again, just a rocks glass full of ice. I'm going to take gin, which of course was what made the Negroni what it is today, because the versions prior to it did not have gin in it. It is said that Count Camillo went to London and discovered gin and of course came back to mix it. So our next ingredient is going to be Campari. We're going to also add 1 ounce or 30 mils, just like the gin. Just like that. And last but not least, 1 ounce, 30 mils of our sweet Vermouth di Torino. Okay, once again, just built over ice. A nice little stir with the spoon, just like you would get it in Florence. And in this case here, we don't know if it's true, in order to differentiate the Americano with the Negroni, only an orange slice was added. Not sure, again, I wasn't there, how true the story can be, but nonetheless, we do know that it is tucked just like that between the ice and the glass, because when I made these in Italy, and I made them for a long time, that is how we made it. If you like what you're watching, please do give us a like below. We would highly appreciate it. This now brings us to the 1920s, where in Harry Meckelon's cocktail book, we find the recipe for a cocktail called the Boulevardier. The Boulevardier also received write-ups in another magazine somewhere between 1927 and 1932. That magazine was called the Boulevardier. It was printed in Paris, but nonetheless, in Harry Meckelon's book, it is 3 equal parts of bourbon, sweet vermouth, and Campari. I'm gonna go ahead and make it, which by the way, I'm gonna leave a link somewhere here below where you can also see me making the Boulevardier along with some bartender friends of mine on the Las Vegas Strip. But in the meantime, I've got some work to do. Okay, so in this glass filled with ice, I'm gonna go ahead and add 1 ounce of Russell's Reserve Bourbon Whiskey. That is 30 milliliters, just like that. And then right on top of that, I am going to put 1 ounce, 30 mils of Campari. Just like that. And easy enough, same amount of sweet vermouth. Okay, now this one here also calls for a little orange, so we're gonna go ahead and cut a nice orange slice, set that right there. And I'm gonna give this a quick stir. And I'm gonna give this its nice little orange slice. And there you have the Boulevardier. Now this point of this amazing journey of the Negroni and its ancestors and its grandchildren, for lack of a better term, brings us to the next drink, which is called the Old Pal. The Old Pal was also published in Harry Meckelon's cocktail book. And in this version here, instead, what we have is we have rye whiskey instead of bourbon, and then we have dry vermouth. So in this drink here, I'm gonna start with the base spirit, which is the Wild Turkey 101 rye. I'm gonna go ahead and put 1 ounce, 30 mils. Next, I am going to put 1 ounce, 30 mils of Campari. Now, newer variations of this cocktail call for different proportions. Sometimes they will add more rye. They will double up on the rye and half on the Campari and the dry vermouth, which brings me to the extra dry vermouth. This was the addition to, or the change that came in the Old Pal, in comparison to the Boulevardier in Henry Meckelon's book, which was the extra dry vermouth. Of course, this is going to give us a drier style of a cocktail. And so now that I have those 3 ingredients in, I'm going to give this a stir. Now, when you're making these types of drinks here, stirred in a coupe, you really want to stir it for quite a while. It's important to get a lot of dilution and to get this drink really, really cold. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a touch. It's telling me that this drink is about ready. So we're gonna set that aside right over there. And right here, I am ready to go with a nice little Old Pal. All right. Now, as I mentioned, this drink here is a little more gentle. It's a little more dry. So in this drink here, we're going to go ahead and put a lemon peel, which is what was listed in Harry Macallone's recipe. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of zest. And as I am making the peel, I'm going to get some of those oils right in this drink. Give this a little zest just like that. And you can discard this if you wish. But in this case here, I'm just gonna give it a little twirl and put it right there. And there you have the Old Pal. Okay, so this brings us to our next cocktail. This cocktail here was seen in a book, a French book called Cocktail de Paris. It was also seen in 1934 in Cocktail Bill Boothby's cocktail book, which I actually happen to have. So I'll set that right here just to kind of give us the tone. And this drink here called for double the amount of gin and equal parts of Campari and sweet vermouth served in a coupe. So let's make it. Okay, we'll set that there. We'll also start chilling our beaker as well. Give this a little chill. So remember, it's 1934 now, right? We are still about 85 years away. None of the variations that I have made so far are any of the modern variations to a Negroni. Everything here is old school stuff. Let's go ahead and give this a chill as well. I'm going to make this a 3-ounce cocktail. So this is going to be 1.5 ounces or 45 mils of Bulldog gin. There we go. Okay, so then we are going to add 3/4 of an ounce or 22 mils of Campari. Just like that. And then lastly, again, 3/4 of an ounce, 22 mils of sweet vermouth. So one might be asking, why are there all these variations to this cocktail? Why are you mostly using the same ingredients? Well, the reality is this drink is so good and is really so easy to mix. It's one of the reasons why it's really hard to mess a Negroni, is because those ingredients go so well together that any combination of gin, sweet vermouth, Campari are going to fit the bill. And throughout the years, as different proportions were born, all of them delicious, such as the Camparinete, they all earn the right of their own to be a variation of a Negroni, or to some extent just a standalone cocktail of their own. Now we're going to strain from the beaker directly into our cocktail coupe, or Nick and Nora. Alrighty. Now, truth be told, a couple of things. In Boothby's book, this cocktail is actually shaken, and I just could not come to the shaking of it because it would have aerated the drink too much. It would have made it fluffy and velvety rather than smooth, which is how I like it. So we're going to go ahead and give this a lemon peel, which also is what is called in the recipe guide. Just like that. And also just a little squeeze of that, a little twist, and boom, this drink's ready. Okay, so this brings us to our next drink, which is the Asmara Negroni. We are now talking 1940s. Now, before I make this, if you did not like this episode yet and you've enjoyed it so far, why don't you do this? I'm going to chill the glass. It was recently discovered, this book, with this recipe by Paolo Ponzo, who is a friend of mine and an Italian cocktail historian. But let's go ahead and make it. So the Asmara is quite an interesting recipe because it calls for a lot more gin, a lot less Campari, and Bianco vermouth. let's start with the gin. So in this mixing glass, I'm going to put 1.5 or 45 mils of gin. Just like that. And then I'm going to put actually 1 ounce of Bianco Vermouth. Now, what is Bianco Vermouth? It's basically a sweeter, a little bit fruity forward, and a little more citrus version of vermouth. So it's going to give a little bit more bright, sweet flavors than the sweet vermouth. And I'm going to go ahead and put 1 ounce, 30 mils, just like that. And last but not least, in this drink here, Campari is just kind of there to hang out a little bit. So in this, in the Asmara, I put 1/2 ounce or 15 mils of Campari. Just like that. So this drink is going to be bright, sweet, a little lighter in color. And there we go. Give this a nice 25-30 second stir. Get that dilution, get those ingredients to mix well together. Nice and fluffy and velvety and delicious. Okay. Okay. And there we have nice little strain of this here. Now this drink here is going to call for an orange peel. Now why are the orange peels, or why are the peels very common, especially in Italy? Well, in Italy it is fair, it is always appreciated to recycle and use the fruit as much as you can. So of course if you're using the peel of the skin for the garnish or for its essential oils, then you're using the inside for its juice. You have very minimal waste. Of course, in Italy, we do not like to waste much. I still remember Mom uses her baking sheets, right? She recycles them, washes them, puts them away. So we really don't like to throw a whole lot away. So in this one right here, actually this garnish is quite thick for such a small glass. So I'm just going to give this a little trim. Just right there. Trim right there. Trim right there. Just like that. And nice little zest of orange, little peel on top. And there we have the Asmara from the 1940s. Okay, so this part of the journey now brings us to the 1950s in a beautiful bar called the Aurum Bar inside of the Westin Excelsior in Rome, where this really cool classic cocktail, a symbol of the Italian dolce vita, was born, and it's called Il Cardinale. Il Cardinale was born, and the story, of course, is nebulous, but Giovanni Raimondo, who is the head bartender of the bar, made this drink for a cardinal. Now, of course, we're in Rome, and then near Rome is the Vatican, and so the cardinal came to visit him. Now, the recipe did evolve from how I'm making it today with the Riesling wine to being made with dry vermouth, but I am going to make you today the version that it's still made today at the Aurum Bar. Okay, so in this drink here, we're going to start with 1.5 ounces, 45 mils of gin. Just like that. Then we're going to add 1 ounce, 30 mils of Riesling wine. This wine is a little sweeter. And then last but not least, of course, we're going to look for a little bit of those bitter notes, the bittersweet notes from the Campari and the color. But we're, again, as we did with the previous cocktail, this was just 1/2 ounce. So it's a little, Campari plays just a little bit in this game. Just like that. Okay. Okay. We're going to give this a nice stir. And as usual, a little dumping of the old ice. And strain the cocktail right in. Nice little pink clear color to it. I'm gonna set that right there. Now when it comes to the garnish, again, we're gonna do an orange peel. And in this case here, this is still presented today as a more swaggered version of all of these cocktails. It just has a little more finesse, pizzazz to it. So I'm just going to trim this orange peel real quick. A peel is a peel is a peel, right? We're just gonna trim it just because we are making so many different versions. We also don't want these drinks to all look the same. Despite the fact that the ingredients that they're calling for does look the same. So I've made this almost Negroni mustache garnish here. Look at those nice little essential oils going in. And then I'm gonna just set that just like that. We're gonna get rid of all this mess. And there we have Il Cardinale. Okay, as I mentioned, I am going to leave a link below in the show description as to when the next Negroni week is going to be. But in the meantime, the next drink that is coming comes from this 1951 book from Ted Saucier called the Laurino. Now, a couple things to say about the Laurino. Number one, it is a Americano, but it calls for more sweet vermouth than it does Campari, so it's going to be a little bit lighter, more acidic. The gin is gone, so it's back to the old school pre-Negronis. The second thing to say is, as I opened this book, as I was reading, it's why I love to nerd out on all of these books, I noticed that this was made at the Westin Excelsior in Rome, which is exactly where the drink we just made was made. This book was published in 1951. The Cardinale was made in the 1940s and 50s. So despite the fact that it doesn't say it, I am pretty sure that Giovanni Raimondo made this cocktail too, but why don't I make it now? Okay, so here I have a glass full of ice. I'm gonna go ahead and take 2 ounces of sweet Vermouth di Torino. Just like that. And then I'm going to add to it 1 ounce of Campari liqueur. I'm actually really excited about this one because that acidity that comes from the nice berry acid flavors that come from the sweet vermouth are going to be able to show up a little bit more in this cocktail, and that really excites me. We're going to go ahead and give this a stir. Just like that. Okay, now this drink too calls for a lemon slice and an orange slice as listed in this book. Luckily we have plenty of those here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut. Actually, I'm gonna look for a smaller one. I'm gonna take this one right here on the orange. And I'm going to take this one right here on the lemon, set them together. Then I'm going to take this orange lemon combination. I'm going to just put it right there, just like that. And there we have the Laurino. Another thing I did not say, you should always trust something with the letters L, A, U, R, and O in their name. Well, the next one brings me to the most playful version of the Negroni riffs. And this one here is called the Negroni Sbagliato, also known as Sbagliato. And it just means wrong, wrongfully made. I made it wrong. Now, while the story goes that the Negroni Sbagliato was made by mistake by Mirko Stocchetto in Milan in his Barbasso, the reality is he was a pro. And I really think that there was no mistake here. This was all intentional, just the name is very playful. I've put a big cube of ice in this one here. And the only reason why I've done that is if you order this drink at Barbasso in Milan, it comes in a big glass. And that's why I'm thinking there was no mistake here. You could tell they were messing around and using some sense of humor. So in this one here, I'm also mimicking some of the big ice that you would find in that drink here. I am going to start with 1 ounce of Cinzano Prosecco. Now, the mistake in this Negroni, the Sbagliato part, was that supposedly Mirko picked up a bottle of Prosecco and put it in to the glass instead of the gin, thus making the Negroni wrong. I'm going to go ahead and pour 1 ounce. Now, you could pour a little more, which I will because I actually like it a little bit more Prosecco forward. And then you can proceed as if you had just put your gin on your built Negroni, right? With your Campari. Actually, I should jigger it. So there's 1 ounce Campari. And last but not least, 1 ounce of Cinzano 1757 Vermouth di Torino. 1 ounce, 30 mils as well. Just like that. Okay. Now, I have personally never had this drink at Bar Basso in Milan, but when I do see it, so I don't know how they garnish it, but when I do see it garnished in pictures from Italy, they use the entire orange slice. So it's going to be a little goofy because it might be a big slice in a small glass, but I'm gonna go ahead just to follow that suit. Put a thin sliced full orange wheel into this drink. Just like that. All right. Alrighty. And so now the orange is kind of pushing forward the ice cube. So the ice cube is kind of wedged in. Therefore, this drink here is not going to have the ice coming out at you when you're drinking it. This drink here, Mirko Stocchetto said to have invented it in 1970 at Bar Basso in Milan. And there you have the Negroni Sbagliato. Okay, this brings us to another interesting variation to the Negroni. Now this one here, truth be told, might even be more of a variation to the Spritz than it is to the Negroni, but of course it has Campari in it. Let me go ahead and make it. It's called La Bicicletta. Now Bicicletta comes from the fact that when you drink this cocktail, or back in the day, the men that would go to the bar to drink this cocktail would take their bike, Bicicletta, to the bar and then either wobble back after drinking it or walk their bike back, which allowed them to not get into any accident. Either or the story goes. The portions are also open for much debate. I am going to make a spritzy version of it in a highball glass because it's the one I like the most. This one calls for your local white wine, and it's mostly local wine, which is why it's a cocktail that can be made everywhere in Italy as long as the white wine that you're using is local to where you're from. Now, there's also in Sardinia a cocktail very similar to this called Aragosta, which of course Aragosta is the color of the lobster, which is going to be the color of this drink. So in this glass here, I'm going to go ahead and put 3 ounces of white wine. Okay, just like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and add 2 ounces of Campari. There we go. And then I'm going to top that off with some soda. Just like that, thus making it again a highball-y style of a spritz. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife. It's a Negroni, it's a spritz, and it's a highball all together. I'm going to go ahead and give this first a stir. Common for this cocktail as well is the orange peel. So I'm going to go ahead and just, ooh, that hit my eye. Give me a like for that, please. And now we're going to give this a little zest of orange. And we're going to put that bad boy just like that. And there you have the Bicicletta. All right, so the next cocktail in this wonderful Negroni journey is going to be the Rosita. The Rosita first appeared in 1989 in the Mr. Boston cocktail book. Okay, so we're gonna start with 1.5 ounces or 45 mils of Espolón Reposado tequila. Just like that. The next thing we're going to add is 1 ounce or 30 mils of Campari. Just like that. And then we're gonna go to our 2 vermouths, sweet vermouth di Torino and extra dry. We're gonna go with 1/2 ounce or 15 mLs of both of those. So there is half of that. And there is half of this. So 1/2 ounce, 15 mils of extra dry vermouth. So we have some tequila, which is gonna give some vegetal, grassy, citrusy notes. Also, it's a reposado, so there might be a little vanilla notes in there. And then we have the 2 vermouths, and we have a Campari. Oh, and I should not forget a couple of dashes of Angostura aromatic bitters. And now we can give this a nice little stir. Just like that. Okay. And this drink here, I feel like it's gonna need some nice freshness. And so when I like to add freshness, I will go to the orange. And this time what I'll do is, rather than putting just the peel, I'll take a nice thick slice just like that, because I want the juice from the orange to leach inside of this cocktail. I want the alcohol to kind of pull it and make it part of the game. So there we have the Rosita cocktail from the Mr. Boston cocktail book from 1989. Okay, so this brings us to the 14th of the 14 cocktails. Up until this point, we were all before the year 2000s, and that was by design. I didn't want to bring in to the picture some of the newer variations of the Negroni, as there are many. I kept it very classic, but the reason why I saved some room for one of the more modern post-2000s, I should say, Negroni, is because this one here is made by yours truly, and I wanted to share it with you. This cocktail here is called the Tornabuoni. And Tornabuoni is the street where the Negroni was created, because the Cazzoni bar where Count Camillo asked Fosco the bartender to add gin to the Americano, thus the Negroni was born, was on a street called Via Tornabuoni. And so this drink here, of course, called the Tornabuoni in honor of that street, just as a nod to what were the origins of the Negroni. In this drink, I put 1 ounce, 30 mils of Moscato Grappa. Moscato Grappa is going to be highly aromatic style of grappa. You're going to get a lot of floral notes, so it's going to be very gentle. And in this, I'm going to add 1 ounce as well, or 30 mils of Cinzano Bianco vermouth. Again, Bianco has those little citrusy, sweet notes that will play really well with the grappa. And then I'm going to go ahead and add 1 ounce of Campari. There we go. And then just 1 dash of Angostura bitters, just like that. Okay, I'm going to give this a nice little stir. Okay. Now, a little point of differentiation that I make here is the garnish. So in Florence, of course, they have the Florentine apple. It kind of looks like this in that it has the 2 colors, kind of where a green apple meets a red. It's also the same size. And the reason why I chose this apple was also because you could see it at the shop, or I saw it at the market, is that it's also has that graininess to it. It's going to be a little more dusty of leaching into my cocktail. So I'm going to take this apple. I'm just going to cut the middle right there. Now, truth be told, I don't want to just use the apple for one garnish. So I'm going to just take this right here and I'm going to make a slice out of it. Not too thick. Just like that. There we go. And then I'm going to set this aside. And then this apple here is going to go right in here. Now, of course, what I'm trying to do here is to get the alcohol to kind of suck out the flavors from the apple. So I'm giving this Negroni variation a little bit of an apple twist, but without putting any artificial fake, anything like that, just a small little apple slice like that. And there you have, from yours truly, the Tornabuoni. Okay, so those are all the Negroni riffs that I wanted to cover. Just a little reminder, in Italy, the cocktail is always served with small bites, a little bit of food, in what is typically just called a snack, or if it's the ritual of their happy hour, called the aperitivo. Of course, an aperitivo can get really intense. There could be Parmesan cheese, prosciutto, rice balls, but at its basic, the cocktails are served with peanuts, some olives, these are Castelvetrano, and some potato chips, and the combination of the saltiness and the fatty of these snacks, along with your Negroni, whichever one you want, is gonna be amazing. If you got value out of this show, please do give me a like and hit subscribe and share it with somebody you love, and come back to Master Glass with me, Livio Lauro, where you get expert instruction for everyday consumption.